12:38 past the hour. We're following breaking news. You can see it right there on your screen. The Dow Jones down about 620 points at this hour now. President Trump has announced that he is going to be imposing a 25% tariff on all imported vehicles and foreign-made auto parts, expected to go into effect next week. Also, almost half of the cars sold in the U.S. and 60% of the auto parts are imported. According to Goldman Sachs, the estimated tariffs could add about $5,000 to $15,000 on the cost of foreign-made cars, and it could add $3,000 to $8,000 to cars made in the U.S. Joining me now is Washington Post opinion columnist Catherine Rampell. She is the new co-host of the evening edition of MSNBC's The Weekend. Catherine, it's great seeing you. Thank you. So Dow at 620, down 620. It's a relatively unusual number to be going at. It's been a roller coaster on Wall Street, but mostly down. Why?
Yeah, mostly a downward heading roller coaster. In
What
fact,
do you think is prompting this days?
we got a whole bunch of ugly economic data today, and this is an ugly response from the markets because of that. So a few different things. We got actual inflation data, actual consumer spending data. The consumer spending data were very weak. It looks like we may be on track to have the worst quarter in real consumer spending, after you adjust for price changes, since early COVID. The inflation numbers themselves, a little bit worse than where we want them to be. Then separately, there was this report from the University of Michigan on consumer sentiment. So these are not actual hard data.
These are how people feel.
How people feel, exactly. It's sort of a softer metric of things. But that was also no bueno, I guess I would say, on a number of fronts. And it had all of the hallmarks of concerns about stagflation, which is the worst possible economic set of circumstances we could get. Stagflation basically means that the economy is deteriorating as prices are going up. And so you saw that in the data because 2/3 of consumers said that they thought unemployment was going to get worse in the coming year. That's the highest share since 2009 during the middle of the financial crisis. Yep. You also saw long-term inflation expectations. So that's, if you ask people how much do you think prices are going to go up, that was at its highest level in like 3 decades. So the numbers were quite bad. And the reason why markets would be freaking out in response to all of this is because it puts the Federal Reserve in a really tight spot. The measures that the Fed would take to deal with higher prices are the opposite of the measures that the Fed would take to deal with a deteriorating labor market or slower growth. So there's this question of, can the Fed continue to cut rates? They've been on pause for a little while. Will they ultimately have to raise rates if inflation gets out of control again? That's not good for stock markets. That's not good for households. That's not good for businesses.
Catherine, so if, and on the sentiment side of the questions, people fear or have concerns about what the economy could look like going back to 2009, that was when we were losing 750,000 jobs a month in this country. What do you think people are, in other words, when you're comparing and contrasting to something that was so massive, like 750,000 jobs a month being lost, why do you think that is?
So I'm not saying that we are actually going to return to the dark days of the financial crisis. There is certainly concern. I think that relates to a few different factors. One, as you mentioned before, tariffs. The tariffs have created, at the very least, a lot of uncertainty in this economy, but at worst, potentially much higher prices. You mentioned car tariffs. So if auto tariffs are imposed, that's going to raise prices for consumers by thousands of dollars on both domestically made cars as well as foreign cars. Even domestic cars use a lot of foreign made parts, or the parts cross borders, at least between Canada and Mexico. The other tariffs are going to raise their prices too, whether we're talking about potentially things like groceries or, appliances that they buy. There was an article the other day about maybe we're going to have a toilet paper shortage again because we get I know, the last thing we need.
There wasn't even a shortage last time, and there was a shortage.
Right. Because paper that would be coming over from Canada will will receive higher tariffs. So some of it's about tariffs. Some of it's about you just sort of like the erratic treatment and behavior of this president, whether we're talking about mass layoffs that were not particularly well considered from Trump towards his government, DOGE, towards his civil servants. That will have effects not only for the civil servants themselves, but for the services that they are involved in, Social Security, food stamps, all sorts of healthcare related issues. That's going to have effects for the typical American. And there are knock-on effects for local economies where those workers are being laid off, the businesses that they patronize, the local coffee shop, et cetera. Those may have some knock-on effects as well.
Why is it you think that when the first Trump administration got rid of NAFTA and then actually, negotiated USMCA with Mexico and Canada, it was the deal made by President Trump's first administration, and now there are tariffs over which essentially destroy USMCA with Canada and Mexico?
I wish I could tell you.
I mean, is there...
I think the problem
What's the logic?
There isn't logic, as far as I can tell. We don't know what Trump's objectives are. They change from day to day. From
American-made cars, American-made parts, American-made washers.
Maybe, except that he is also tariffing the inputs to all of those things, right? So cars, washing machines, dishwashers use a lot of steel. Right. We are also tariffing
aluminum for cars.
Yes, depending on the model.
Right.
For the typical car, the highest share of that car by weight is steel. More than half of the weight of a car is steel. So if you make steel more expensive, that's not going to be good for U.S. automakers. So he's tariffing the inputs as well as the finished products. He's tariffing the stuff that goes into the cars and the cars themselves. All of that is going to be passed along, at least in part, down the food chain to consumers. So it's unlikely, in my view, to have much of a manufacturing renaissance effect that he promises, but will cause a lot of damage in the process.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that, there's been so much positive communication between specifically the Trump administration of 2025 and Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. There has not been that same level of communication with the Canadian authorities, even though today the president of the United States had that call that both sides are saying was very positive. But I'm just wondering, how do you deal with a business partner that has, quote, good communication with you, like they've had with Claudia Sheinbaum and previously with Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and yet there doesn't seem to be any movement on the United States side to bring those tariffs down when fentanyl has been going down, when the number at the border is pretty much down to zero right now. So there is actual movement from the Mexican side, and yet to no avail for the Americans?
I think this is, again, the issue. Trump does not actually know what he wants.
Where are the metrics?
Right. Is it about fentanyl? Is it about immigration? Is it about, no, they don't care about those things. They just want to raise tariff revenue.
Right, because fentanyl has been down to almost,
and was not really a problem ever with the Canadian government, right? So it all felt a little bit like a fig leaf, like a pretext for just throwing around these tariffs because it made Trump feel tough. I don't know. He loves tariffs. He can't really decide why he loves them. And again, some of these objectives, if they are real, are contradictory. If you're trying to raise revenue from tariffs, then that suggests you don't care about using them as a threat to get down fentanyl, for example.
And if so, I'm just wondering, give me the metrics, right? This is what I require. Okay. Metrics are there or they're not.
Right.
Catherine, it's great to talk to you in
Likewise.
person. It's great to see you. Thanks.